Today's question is going to be a fun one because it lets us dive into such a nerdy philosophical question. Games as we know it are meant to be fun and something that allows us, as humans, to pass the time. The fun, however, becomes a derivative in various forms of success. Will you find fun from accomplishing the challenge put forth? Will you find fun by besting your opponent? Will you find fun in solving the puzzle, the equation, or will you find fun through the repetitive action of the gameplay loop? All of these feelings, experiences, and wins all constitute as being fun, and it's also what defines a game, at least in my humble opinion. And no one or group of people should ever tell you what is fun for you, especially when it comes to your video games. So the game we're diving into today is not going to be for everyone, which is why I titled today's video with a stereotypical headline eye-catcher. So, should you play games that hate you? Specifically, should you play Elden Ring?
Foul tarnished, in search of the Elden Ring. Someone must extinguish thy flame. Let it be Margit the Fell. But these foolish ambitions to rest.
Sed nemonos consolatur aureum cuiras beatus condum nunc deminuit nos destinatem matribus.
The only way to stand before the Elden Ring and become the Elden Lord is to pass the thorns. My purpose serves to aid in that very act.
So let's discuss. For this video, I separated Elden Ring into 4 pieces. I'll go over my thoughts and discussion points over the game's tutorial, its story, its gameplay loop, and then my personal experiences on who should play Elden Ring. Chapter 1, Tutorials. I think in today's gaming world, a lot of people have had the debate of good tutorials versus bad tutorials. And the general consensus towards gamers that I would describe as hobbyists is that a bad tutorial is a game that holds your hand through every single action, like press W to move forward. A good tutorial is usually described as feeling natural. For example, tell me pressing A can open a door when my character is standing physically in front of a door, and then let me know that if I hold A, I can kick it open so it actually knocks over an enemy on the other side of the door. However, some people still discuss and revel in the lack of tutorials in games from the early console generations. For example, when you do boot up the original Mario games on the Nintendo, nothing indicates that you need to use the right button key to move to the right, nor does it indicate that the A button will jump or that the B button will cast Fireball, but only if you've gotten the Flower Power power-up. But everyone universally figures that out. The controller or arcades at the time only had directional keys or joysticks and 2 buttons, maybe 4. It wasn't too complicated for anyone to figure out. With that same understanding, these hobbyist gamers, in their own way, describe that figuring things out within a game is part of the fun. It's a puzzle that needs solving, and figuring out that puzzle constitutes as fun. Of course, since games have developed rapidly these past 30 plus years, and yes, it does hurt me to say 30 plus now, you should be told to some extent that pressing a certain button combination with a shield will allow you to post or parry an incoming attack. But mastering the timing of that action and the nuances of what they can mean for your playthrough, that should be up to the player, not the tutorial. Elden Ring, I think by far as most From Software games do, they do this as a core principle to their game design. The intro portion of Elden Ring, of course after the first part of the game and arguably the hardest for some, the character creation screen, is a perfect guided tour of the game's mechanics. This is how you jump. Here's something you need to jump over. Ah, you have a shield? Try doing this parry move. But everything you're doing, even in this starting area, has repercussions. You can die, or these creatures and monsters aren't waiting for you to parry. They still want you, the player, to die. But at the same time, you do feel a semblance of safety. It's just one monster, or the monster is super slow, or it's digging through the dirt so you get your chance to attack it. But as you continue on your path, you reach an area littered with warning signs from other players, and a silence that triggers your human lizard hybrid brain that something bad is waiting for you. And then the game confirms this. It gives you a monster to face, a monster that embodies all of the things you've learned up until now, but at the level and skill set that you'd only understand if you've been playing for hours. And the first challenge, although possible, slaps you down and puts you as the player in your place. You are called Tarnish, and you are maidenless, which is by far one of the funniest statements to call a bunch of video game players as they start to play your game. So this beginning, I think, is a beautiful start to introducing the players not only to what the rest of the game will be like, but also setting a tone, from visuals to gameplay to difficulty. I personally have, in a way, grown up with From Software games. I played the original Demon's Souls on the PlayStation 3 era, and I've played every Soulsborne era game minus Sekiro. Not sure why, but I just kind of missed the boat on that one, and I almost actually missed the boat for Elden Ring. And from that history, I sort of see a lot of these tones coming ahead of time. It's actually a very standard tutorial at this point, synonymous with this developer. Other developers have begun copying these gameplay loops and difficulty challenges due to From Software's success. But for the player that has never experienced this tutorial style, you'll at least know from this point if you'll be refunding or continuing forward. Which brings us to Chapter 2, Story. Elden Ring's gameplay is meant to be a challenge, and similar to other games within its developer's catalog, it continues a similar storytelling style. Elden Ring incorporates a lot of passive storytelling through its world design, imagery, and static imagery. For example, there are areas where you will see a city elevated high above the waterline of a particular lake. But within the waterways, there are crumbling buildings, derelict objects, and wandering monsters, and even some aquatic creatures. It's never explicitly stated that this town was subject to an intense flooding, or that it fell from the sky as it was no longer supported by the magic from above. But by being in the area and seeing all of these items, you begin to piece these items and stories together in your own head. Additionally, a lot of story elements are introduced to the player via first-hand accounts, or if we want to use historical source terminology, primary sources. Elden Ring, as with all other From Software games, does not use a standard storytelling approach of a narrator or a grand quest line dictation. The story fleshes itself out via the characters, even text within item descriptions. That is not to say that there aren't cutscenes or a loose narration that you can follow. Those do exist, but it's incredibly simplified. You are tarnished. Tarnished should not be the Elden Lord to claim the Elden Ring. Unless you can. And if you do, this era that everyone lives in will end. But maybe that's not a bad thing. And that's all you get. But if you wish to understand that, to bring about the end of this era and restore order from the cosmic entities that have influenced the lands in between, down to the demigods born of two families originating with the same father, the racist suppression of a people afflicted at birth with growing horns all about their bodies, or the political tensions between magic originating from the cosmic throne glass meteor shards versus that of the moon versus that of a separate sect of night magic, or the betrayal of a daughter splitting her soul in physical manifestations and murdering another demigod with the use of her mother's rune of death, or even the various entities of dragons and the old world legends crafted from the skins of countless victims. Well, if you want to understand all that, you're going to have to talk to NPCs and read descriptions of items and explore. This realistic way of historical accounts of primary sources actually creates one of the most interesting parts of video games that, as far as I can tell, is becoming less and less frequent. That is, Elden Ring, by its way of storytelling, actually starts to create this story community. The game's difficulty, stress-inducing areas, sheer amount of enemies, and specifically to Elden Ring, its map scale, makes it daunting for a player to be able to experience and even discover all of these primary sources of information. I myself only got to experience 2 specific endings within my 80 to 100 hour gameplay. According to Wikipedia, or the Elden Ring Wiki, which is really the Elden Ring community as a whole, there's actually 6 specific endings, and some are locked behind a series of quests that have to be triggered by doing certain actions with certain NPCs and by electing to support these specific people. I myself stumbled upon one specific ending, and it was because I was lost within this underground area and I discovered this NPC that was originally at the beginning of the game, and she was just there, and my curiosity alone led me to continue it until I was able to acquire this item, and I was like, well, this seems pretty important. And it was. Literally at the end of the game where I was given the option to use it or not use it. So a decision I made at like hour 45 ended up becoming apparent at hour 75 when I beat the game. So all of this is to say that the story of Elden Ring lacks a overarching narrative, but in its own way, whether it's truly to be intentional by the developers or not, it actually develops this fun story community. And the actions outside of the game in terms of like lore video watching or wiki reading and all these days even seeing a miniature guides on like Instagram and TikTok, if that's your thing. And to me, it's very interesting and very fun. So that kind of leads us into the next topic of the game outside of story, which is Chapter 3, and Elden Ring's increasingly difficulty loop. So, now that we discussed the tone of the game and its story, let's talk about the gameplay loop. The loop of Elden Ring is very straightforward, and from the clips that you've seen in this video, you probably have an understanding of the loop. The loop is you explore this world, and you follow this loose trail of light that guides you on the main quest, and you defeat either a lot of enemies or one very challenging enemy. The weapons, armor, style of combat, and focus within these elements is up to you, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses depending on the area, zone, and the enemy that you're facing. Very RPG-esque. So of course, within every community, you're gonna find commentary, guides, and discourse on what is the easiest or the coolest or the real Souls player's style of play. In short, the less items and stats and assistance you use, the more quote-unquote social clout you'll have in the community. But this point is something that I think is the most interesting part of the game and is very, very core to its fun component. The gameplay loop is what makes this game fun, something we alluded to in the introduction of the video. If we take a traditional single-player game like Free Cell or Solitaire, with a standard deck of cards, we can use this example of what someone may find fun and use it as a comparison. For those of you that don't know, Solitaire and Free Cell are both games with the same end goal. Use all the cards to match the suits and have them be in order. However, Free Cell is a version of Solitaire where it is claimed to be the most difficult version of the game, with all the cards being face up from the beginning of the game, and it becomes more of a testament of skill and matching than luck. But for many people who grew up sharing a family computer with limited internet connectivity, I think we all have a preference for which game they enjoyed, and anecdotally, I vividly remember the only person I knew who liked Free Cell was my father, because he preferred this skill challenge versus the luck-based version of a standard Solitaire, at least on Windows 95. But here's the point. They are both card games with the same objectives at the end of the game. If you had fun getting there, then that's all that matters. Elden Ring's goal is to be difficult. There is only one version of the game, and that comes out of the box, and it's going to be hard. When facing off against some known names in the game, such as Melania, the Blade of Mikola, or the Fire Giant, or just meeting Margit, the Fell Omen, a bit too soon in your journey, you are going to die, and you may die less or more than the average player. I mean, just looking at the Steam achievements, literally at the time of writing this, close to 65% of the game's players haven't defeated Melania, who may be considered an optional boss, but it is one of the claimed hardest bosses of the base game. And if you've played the game, or watched a cutscene, or just chatted with someone in this game's community, you will know about her. But how you beat these bosses and conquer these objectives is up to you. Me personally, I play every Soulsborne game, for at least the first time, the same way every time. Big weapon, big shields, big armor, and maybe a little too much health. That's my style. I love a tanky good boy. Where others want magic, or these holy faith-based magics, and some other people may just do random spreads of skills and love summoning other players online to help them through it. At the end of the day, if you beat the boss and get the victory screen, no one can really take that from you. But that leads us into my final chapter, and, of course, my favorite chapter. Chapter 4. Should you play this game that hates you? And that's a bit dramatic to say and write, and maybe it should be reworded to games that don't want you to win. But even within the story, Elden Ring doesn't want you to win. You are unexpected to win. You, the Tarnished, it's destined that you won't. So, should you play it? Should you look to challenge these adversaries and put yourself through arguably frustrating challenges? In this video, I actually wanted to take advice from commenter on my last video because I really enjoyed their insight and POV when viewing my content. They talked about this on my Chrono Trigger video, and I kind of talked about it being a long game or that it didn't respect your time, and they made some great points about looking at how I word things. And it's, is the game respecting my time, or is it just a game that requires more of my time? And it was a really interesting retrospective to it and it's made me kind of rework this portion of my videos. So here's my attempt at thinking more holistically when I describe should you play a game. One big portion I'd say is that Elden Ring is going to be a game that takes two separate types of time investment. There is a mechanic skill that takes time to learn. Whether you choose to build your character that requires them to roll around and dodge out of the way at a precise moment, or if you just want to cast spells when it's safe. There is going to be a time investment learning these timings and approaches and making sure your hands can move fast enough. Personally, I spent a lot of time typing and using my mouse for my day job, so I still have a lot of those mechanical actions per minute, and those are still ingrained while I play Elden Ring. But every new boss and area has a bit of a learning curve. It does get easier while playing, but out of my 100-hour playtime, I'd say I didn't really feel the rhythm until about 15 to 20 hours in. The other investment is going to be the story, difficulty, and the exploration portion. Elden Ring is a huge game, especially by From Software standards. And although they do give you a horse in this game, a lot of the areas have a natural population feel to it. There are a lot of areas that, although are beautiful to look at and get lost in, you will spend time traversing them and then discovering something, maybe a town or a cave or a major city. And if you aren't rushing the game via some guided walkthrough, I would elect to say that 50% of your game time investment will just be exploring around. And to me, after my foray from Chrono Trigger, I just wanted to get lost without consequence. I wanted to just see things or find an item that wasn't even special, but I only found it because I chose to hop along this mountain ledge with my horse. So I'd say Elden Ring is for people who do want a challenge and they want a game with a sense of adventure and exploration. It's going to be a game that makes you work for your achievements, and it will reward you. Regardless if you choose to be clever or just choose to put the reps in, it is a game that I will say does require an investment from you though. And I found myself avoiding the game if I only had something like a half hour to play a video game that night, or if my cats were being extra silly and wanted to jump up on my computer keyboard. Trust me, dying because your cat jumps onto you as you're trying to roll away from a massive flaming sword swing is an experience that will make you laugh for a good few minutes. Elden Ring is definitely the hardest From Software game I've run into though. I think it was the first time I was ever lost trying to find what area I should naturally go to, or just figuring out boss mechanics. For players of the game, I think I made it to Malekith about 30 or 40 soul levels underleveled, and realized for the first time that I may need to go look up a guide or the wiki to see if there's other areas that I should go to. Turns out I had not entered the entire southeastern portion of the map or the northwestern portion. So to me, those moments are fun in a game. I like being challenged. I like being told I'm in the wrong place and that maybe I should go somewhere else. So for my advice column on who Elden Ring may not be for, I'd say it's one of those games that may affect people who struggle with frustrating games. Elden Ring's fun comes from success and overcoming a challenge. And I think it's fair for me to say, if you play video games to relax or unwind, this may not be the game for you. I don't want to make the statement anymore of this game doesn't respect you or your time, but more of the statement of this game's mission is to challenge you in multiple ways. And I think if that doesn't sound fun to you, then this game may not be for you. At least I may say it's not the game for you right now. Outside of that though, Elden Ring really is a blank canvas of fun. There's exploration, story, horror, fun combat, replayability, lovable characters, and a community that is really fun to just be a part of. Even if it just means learning the memes and reading or watching what others are doing. Which, by the way, I'm going to drop a few links in my description to a few other content creators and links that really showcase some of the amazing people in the community. From lore deep divers to people who talk about how Elden Ring and Dark Souls made them a better person. I'm not a huge out of 10 reviewer type, but to me, Elden Ring is like one of those like 9.8 out of 10 experiences, and really was one of the best challenges I've had in years. Beating this game and exploring its world was the most fun gaming journey I had at the end of 2024, and that was including the expansion of the Shadow of Erdtree, which is a quite pricey expansion to the base game, and I would say it dials up the difficulty by like 2 or 3 times. So all in all, say, should you play games that hate you? I'd say yes, but I'm always curious to hear other people's thoughts. So from, if you've tried Elden Ring, did you enjoy it? Was it not for you? Would you go try it now? And that's always an open question to anyone that wants to comment. So as always, thank you if you watch this video. I'm off to my next adventure, and I'm really not sure where that will be. So thank you.